What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Patrick here, moving on to the next example. So the monthly income of two friends is in the ratio of 4:3, and their monthly expenses is in the ratio of 3:2. Each saves $1,200 per month, and we have to find their monthly incomes. Now, this particular question, there's a bunch of different ways to go about it, and as the video progresses, I'll show you the different ways. Usually there's a trade-off between lots of work and intuition. So the more intuitive ways to solve these questions usually require a little bit more algebraic work, and then the less intuitive ways require less algebraic work. And so I'll show you the different ways as we go on. In general, though, for all the ways, the relation or the equation that we're going to be using is whenever you have income, in this case it's going to be monthly income, and then you subtract the monthly expenses, you get the monthly savings. This is what we're going to be using this relationship over here throughout the video. And so what I'm going to do is introduce some variables. So what I'm going to let X and Y be the monthly incomes. And it's two friends, so we'll call it friend A and B. Right? X and Y will be the monthly incomes of friend A and friend B respectively. And then I'm going to let M and N be the monthly expenses of friend A and B. So notice we're introducing a lot of variables here, in more specifically 4 variables, but as the video goes on, you'll see that we're really going to simplify this. So starting with friend A, their income is X, their expenses are M, and how much are they saving? $1,200 per month, like that. And then the other friend, friend B, so their income is Y, their expenses are N, and they're also saving $1,200 per month. Right? So already we're creating some equations here. Now what we can also do is use these ratios of the incomes and the expenses to create even more equations here. And so we're told the monthly income of the two friends is in the ratio of 4:3. So let's just pretend that friend A has the larger income. So X is the larger income. It doesn't really matter, but let's say that that's what we assume. So this is going to be friend A, this is going to be friend B. And if they're saving the same amount, that means that if friend A has the larger income, it means they also have the larger expenses. And so 4:3, that's the ratio of their incomes. We can say X over Y, the ratio of the larger income to the smaller income, is equal to 4/3, using that ratio there. And then we could do the same thing with the expenses. We can say the expense of friend A over the expense of friend B is equal to 3/2. Right? So just introducing some more equations. And in fact, notice that there are 4 variables here. So what we need is 4 equations, 4 unique equations to solve for them. And notice that we actually have 4 equations, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so at this point, we can solve for all the variables. Now to do so, there again, from this point, a bunch of different ways we can go about it. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to isolate for this M and this N, and then I'm going to plug it in here into this equation. So if we isolate here, we can bring the negative M over, bring the 1,200 over. So we'd have X minus 1,200 is equal to M. Bring this over, bring this over. And then for this one, we can say Y minus 1,200 is equal to N. We're just rearranging this. Basically, if income minus expense is equal to the savings, then that means income minus the savings is equal to the expenses. That's what we did here. So this is M, this is N. We can now plug it for those. And so what we would end up with is X minus 1200 over Y minus 1200 is equal to 3 over 2, like that. So what we did was we basically took this, and this, those three equations, combined them into one, and now we have an equation in terms of two variables, X and Y, to solve for. So we have this, and we have this over here. So now we have two variables to solve for, X and Y. Notice there's no M or N in both of these. We have two variables to solve for, X and Y, and we have two equations. And so we can just do substitution or elimination. And there's actually a way I'll show you later on to even further get rid of these variables just in this equation and then make this in terms of one. I'll show that to you at the end. It's a little less intuitive, but it would be less work. This here is more intuitive. Now, we didn't have to necessarily isolate for the M and N. That's what I chose to do. You could have also isolated for the X and Y. Okay, so what I'm going to do, these two is what I'm going to work with, but I'm going to show you, if you went the other way, how you can set it up. I'm not going to solve it the other way. I'm going to solve it this way. So I'm going to write these out over here for later. But I'm going to show you how you could set it up if you wanted to go the other way in terms of isolating for the X and Y. So what you would do, in that case, the X you'd leave on the left side, bring the negative M over, so you'd have 1200 minus M, and then you'd have Y equals 1200 minus N, and then you'd plug in these expressions into this ratio, so you'd end up with 1200 minus M, which is what the X is, over 1200 minus N, which is what the Y is, and you'd let that equal 4 over 3. So now notice you have an equation in terms of M and N. There's no X and Y, and then you could use this and this to solve for the N and N. But what you'd be solving for would be the expenses, and then you'd have to plug them into these general equations to solve for the incomes. Because we're finding the monthly incomes, I feel like it's just easier to solve for them directly. Remember, X and Y are the monthly incomes. That's what we're solving for. But if maybe this question was asking what are their monthly expenses, you could still solve for the incomes, but then you'd have to plug them here, solve for M and N. Or you could solve for M and N directly using this equation and this equation over here. Right, so that's what I mean, multiple ways to go about this entire question. But again, I'm just going to use these two to solve for the incomes directly. So what I'm going to do is first cross multiply here. So this times this, I'll have 2 times X minus 1200 equals 3 times Y minus 1200. Right, I'm just cross multiplying here just to get rid of these fractions. We can cross multiply with these actually too. So we'll have 3x equals 4y. I'm just going to keep that there for now. I'm going to work with this. I'm going to simplify this a little bit. So distribute. We can plug in, we can isolate for this x or this y, plug it in here or here. But then we're going to have to distribute and it's going to get a little hectic. I suggest simplifying this first and then plugging in whatever you want. So we'll have 2x minus 2400 here equals 3y minus 3600, like that. And then from here, I would bring the 2x over, bring the 3600 over, so we'd have positive 3600 because it's negative here, minus 2400 is equal to 3y minus 2x, like that. So we'd have 1200 equals 3y minus 2x. So now we got this, and we got this, and now I feel like things are going to be easier to solve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, doesn't really matter, you could do substitution, you could do elimination. I'm going to isolate for the y. So I'm going to say y equals 3 over 4x, or 3x over 4 if we divide both sides by 4 here. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to plug it in here. So we'd have 1200 is equal to 3 times 3 over 4x minus 2x, like that. And then from here, notice we have now an equation in terms of one variable. So we'd have 1200 is equal to 9 over 4x minus 2x. The 2x I'm going to change to 8 over 4, so we have a common denominator here. We'd end up with 1 over 4x, or 0.25x, equals 1200. Divide both sides by 1 over 4 to isolate for the x. That would mean x is equal to 1200 divided by 1 over 4. It's like 1200 over 1 divided by 1 over 4, which is like 1200 over 1 multiplied by 4 over 1, which is equal to 4800. And so that is one of the answers. That right there, that x represents the monthly income of friend A, of the friend with the higher income. And then from there, to get the lower income, the other friend's income, we can basically take this, plug it in anywhere. Where I'm going to plug it in, I'm going to take this, and I feel like it's best to plug it in here or here. Both of these are the same thing. I feel like that would be easiest versus plugging it in here and then still dealing with like cross multiplication and all. We still have to deal with cross multiplication here, but there's just one term in each numerator and denominator versus here there's like 2 terms. So I feel like it'll be more complex. So to solve for y, again, it doesn't matter though which one, you would still get that same y value. So if I take this, if I plug it in here, we'd have 4800 over y is equal to 4 over 3, like that. Right? And then this times this, so we'd have 4800 times 3 would give us what? 14, 400 is equal to 4y. Then divide both sides by 4. We'd have y is equal to this divided by 4 would give us 3600. And so that would be the other income. So we got 4800 for the larger income, 3600 for the smaller income. And so those are the 2 answers. Those are the 2 monthly incomes. And then notice we can check this. So notice that this 4800 over 3600, what does that simplify to? Notice we can, the zeros would go away. Then we could divide both of these by 12. We'd have 4 over 3. Which makes sense. That's what the ratio of their incomes are. Now you can also check the expenses and make sure they're in the ratio of 3 to 2, because if we take that general equation, income minus expenses equals savings, rearrange it so we isolate for the expenses, expenses would be the income minus the savings. So if we start with friend A, their income is 4800, they're saving 1200, which means their expenses are 3600. And then friend B, their income is 3600, subtract their savings of 1200, their expenses would be 2400. So then 3600 over 2400, the zeros cancel out, we can divide both the numerator and the denominator by 12, so we'd get 3 over 2, which makes sense. That's the ratio that we were given in the question. So there's ways to check your answer too. Now, to finish off, what I want to show you is how to solve this with one variable. Again, it's a little less intuitive, but what you can do is here at this point, let me write out this again. So we got x over y equals 4 over 3, like this. What you can do here is you can introduce another variable, and you could put it in both the numerator. Actually, let's not use m since we already used it. Let's use, I don't know, whatever, a. And put it in both the numerator and denominator, because notice the a's would just cancel out and we'd still be left with 4 over 3. So 4a over 3a is in the ratio of 4 to 3, like that. You could think of this as maybe like a constant that you're multiplying. And so what you can do is you can now plug in 4a and 3a for x and y over here. So we'd have 4a minus 1200 over 3a minus 1200 is equal to 3 over 2, like that. And then from here, you can cross multiply, and you just have to solve for that a value. Like that. So you'd have 8a minus 2400 is equal to 9a minus 3600. Bring the negative 3600 over, bring the 8a over, and then you'd have 9a minus 8a, which would be 1a. Positive 3600 minus 2400 will give you 1200, but that is the constant, the counter, and then x is 4a, which would be 4 times 1200, which would give you 4800, which is the answer we got before. And then we'd have y equals 3a, 3 times 1200, which is 3600. So again, in my opinion, this is a little bit less intuitive to do, but the algebra is a lot quicker because you're only dealing with one variable. You don't have to worry about doing like a substitution and elimination. But in my opinion, this is more intuitive, where you have these multiple variables. First off, getting to this point is a bit of work as well, as we did before. But once you get to this point, 2 ways to do it. You can do it quicker by introducing a new variable, plugging it in here, and everything's going to be in terms of one variable, and then finding out the incomes after. Or you can directly get the incomes, but then you'd have to do a substitution or elimination using these two equations like we did before. Right, whichever way you do it, the answers are 4800 and 3600.